Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So I've got some pretty wild news for you today that I just can't keep to myself. It's one of those stories that makes you go, wait, what? That actually happened. Let me tell you about this bizarre incident that went down in Whangārei, New Zealand, and the legal aftermath that followed. 2023, a man named Brian Amataiti, who's 56 years old, was at home in Raumanga. Now, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the area, but I'm guessing it's a pretty quiet neighborhood. Well, that peaceful night was shattered when a teenager at a neighboring house decided to crank up the music way too late into the evening. And let's just say, the volume was not just loud, it was deafening. So loud, in fact, that it was enough to rattle the windows and probably make the neighbor's dogs howl in protest. You might be thinking, okay, so what's the big deal? People play loud music sometimes. But here's where it gets interesting. Brian Amataiti, who was home with his family, decided that this was a problem worth addressing. Instead of calling the police or maybe even just going to the neighbor and asking them to turn it down, he took matters into his own hands in a way that's not exactly the most conventional approach. The situation escalated into a verbal altercation. Now, I can't say exactly what was said, but I'm guessing it was something along the lines of, "You're playing music so loud I can hear it in my bones," and, "Well, you're the one with the chainsaw." Anyway, things got heated, and before you could say this is going to end badly, Amataiti took a chainsaw, yes, a chainsaw, and started chasing the teenager across his property. Now, this isn't just any chainsaw, it's a full-blown, revving chainsaw that's capable of cutting through wood like it's butter. And he's not just chasing the kid, he's doing it in a cul-de-sac. That's not exactly a high-traffic area, but it's also not a place you'd expect to find someone with a chainsaw running around at 10 p.m. I know what you're thinking. Is this guy serious? Did he actually do that? And the answer is yes. But here's the kicker. No one was injured in the incident. That's actually pretty surprising given the situation. So even though the chainsaw was revving and the teenager was running for his life, somehow no one got hurt. But the damage was already done and the legal consequences were about to follow. What happened next? Well, the case went to trial and the jury had to determine whether Amataiti was guilty of the charges he faced. Now, here's where it gets a bit complicated. The man claimed self-defense, which is a pretty common argument in cases where someone is accused of using excessive force, but the jury didn't buy it. They found him not guilty of 2 charges, threats to kill and possession of an offensive weapon. However, they did convict him of assault with a weapon, which is a serious offense. That's not a light sentence, and it's definitely not something you want to be on the receiving end of. The judge in the case, Judge Taryn Bailey, had some pretty strong words about the incident. She emphasized the volatile nature of the situation and the danger that the chainsaw posed. She made it clear that even though no one was injured, the behavior was still a serious criminal offense. I mean, imagine if that chainsaw had actually made contact with someone. That could have ended in a tragedy. So the judge was pretty clear that this wasn't just a case of someone being a little overzealous with their neighbor. It was a case of someone using a weapon in a way that could have caused serious harm. Here's something else that's pretty interesting. Amataiti had no prior criminal record. That's not something you hear about very often in these kinds of cases. He was genuinely remorseful, which I think is an important point. It shows that he recognizes what he did was wrong and that he's willing to take responsibility for his actions. But even with that, the court still had to impose some kind of punishment, and that's where the sentence comes in. What was the sentence? Well, the court sentenced Amataiti to 9 months of supervision. That's not a jail sentence, but it's still a form of punishment. He also had to do 120 hours of community work, which is a lot. And on top of that, he was ordered not to associate with the neighbors for 6 months. That's a pretty strict order, but I guess it's meant to prevent any further incidents like this from happening. So even though he's not going to jail, he's still going to have to deal with some pretty serious consequences. His lawyer had some arguments, and I think they were pretty compelling. His lawyer argued that Amataiti had been separated from his family for over 18 months and should be allowed to return to the street. That's a pretty strong argument, especially considering the fact that he had no prior criminal record, but the court didn't grant that request. I guess they felt that the sentence needed to be a deterrent, even if it was a first-time offender. And I can't say I disagree with that. Using a chainsaw to chase someone is not something you want to encourage, even if it was in the heat of the moment. I know this might sound like a bit of a far-fetched story, but it's actually a real-life event that happened in Whangārei. And it's a reminder that even the most seemingly minor disputes can escalate into something much more serious. It's also a reminder that using a weapon, even in self-defense, can have serious legal consequences. So even if you think you're acting in self-defense, it's important to remember that the law has its own set of rules, and that using a weapon is not something to be taken lightly. What's the takeaway from this story? Well, first of all, it's a reminder that loud music can be a real problem, especially in residential areas. It's also a reminder that sometimes people take matters into their own hands when they feel like they're being wronged. But as this case shows, that can lead to very serious consequences, even if no one is injured. It's also a reminder that the legal system is there to protect people, even if it's not always perfect. And finally, it's a reminder that even if you think you're doing the right thing, it's always better to call the police and let them handle the situation rather than taking things into your own hands. That's the story. What do you think about it? Should someone like Mai Tai have been sentenced to community work, or should he have been sent to jail? Was it a justified use of self-defense, or was it just plain reckless? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss any of our future content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.